So let's talk about a case from 1989. A 27-year-old Indigenous woman, Alberta Williams, was murdered. For decades, decades, this case just went cold. The whole investigation was built on this one single accepted timeline of her last known moments. But what happens when that entire timeline gets completely turned on its head? And that's really the core question we're exploring here. What if the official timeline of a murder was just wrong? What if the police, the family, everyone involved had the wrong day entirely? What if Alberta Williams was actually seen alive a full 24 hours after she was supposed to have disappeared? Okay, so take a look at this. This timeline right here, this is what changes everything. For 27 long years, the police investigation focused only on Friday night. That was it. But now, a totally new story has popped up, one that places Alberta in a completely different city, Terrace, on Saturday. And you gotta understand, this one single detail could rewrite the entire history of this case.
So, where did this bombshell information even come from? Well, it came from 3 family members. And get this, after decades of staying silent, they've come forward with a story about a visit from Alberta on that exact Saturday.
The story comes from a guy named Ed. He's the husband of Amanda, who is a really key witness here. He says, and I'm quoting him, he was there that night, and he saw Alberta there with Jack and another white guy. They needed to borrow $20 to get this guy back to work, because he had to drive cab. So Alberta shows up with her uncle, Jack Little, and this other man. And this guy, he's in a big hurry to get back to his taxi job. All they wanted was $20 for gas. And here's the thing, it wasn't just Ed. His wife Amanda and her sister Yvonne, they add even more layers to this story. They remember it was Saturday because they just come from a family party. They all recall it was raining, that the men with Alberta were drinking whiskey, and that Alberta herself was just soaked with no jacket on. You see? These are small but really consistent details coming from 3 different people. That's hard to ignore.
But it's Amanda, the main witness, who gives us this really vivid, really specific image. She says she was with these two people and just her in the back of that truck. It was a black crew cab truck. Alberta, all alone in the back. And that detail, the black truck, that becomes the new focus of this whole thing.
All right, so we've got our Uncle Jack. We know he was with her. But who was the other guy in that black truck? The one who drove a cab and was in such a rush?
Well, the witnesses identified him. His name was Ken Collinson. And just like that, with one name, this 27-year-old cold case suddenly has a brand new person of interest.
And Ken Collinson wasn't just some random stranger. Not even close. Back in '89, he was a taxi driver, sure. But he was also living with Alberta's own sister, Kathy. And here's the kicker. He and Kathy co-owned a black Toyota truck. A truck that sounds an awful lot like the one Amanda described.
So armed with all this new information, investigators finally track Ken Collinson down 27 years later. And his interview? Well, this is where things start to get really, really complicated.
This is really the heart of the whole contradiction. You've got 3 witnesses saying they saw him with Alberta in Terrace on Saturday night. But when Ken is asked about it, his response is just, no. No. I wasn't in Terrace the next day. I work, 12, 14-hour days driving. He claims he was driving his cab, nowhere even close to Terrace.
And the contradictions just keep piling up. Remember that really specific detail from Amanda about Alberta being in the back of the truck? Well, that little detail becomes incredibly important when investigators ask Ken about his truck. And this is a huge problem with his story. At first, he describes the truck like this. It was a 2-door and had a small seat in the back, which, by the way, is exactly what you'd need for Amanda's story to be true. But then, almost immediately, he corrects himself. Oh, pardon me. No, it wasn't. It was a single cab, bench seat. That was it. He just changes his story mid-sentence.
So why, right? That's the question that just hangs over this entire interview. Why would he describe a back seat that perfectly fits the witness account only to immediately take it back? That's not something you just misremember. That change feels really suspicious.
But hold on, it's not just Ken's story that has holes in it. There's a major problem with what the witnesses remember too. Amanda and Yvonne were so sure it was raining, pouring. But when you look at the official weather records from Environment Canada for that night in Terrace, it was mainly clear, no rain at all. So what does that mean? Suddenly their memory is called into question, and the whole thing gets even murkier. Ken's history with the police is also pretty telling. He was interviewed way back in 1989, right after Alberta's body was found. But here's the thing. The police only asked him about Friday night, because that's the timeline they were working with. Years later, when they came back to him, they asked for a DNA sample. And his response? He refused, said it wasn't necessary.
So, with all of this, a new timeline, stories that contradict each other, a flat-out refusal to cooperate, we're left with a case that is just nowhere near solved. It's just filled with these lingering, unanswered questions.
So, what are the big takeaways here? It really boils down to these key questions. First, is the memory of rain just a simple mistake after almost 3 decades, or does it mean something more? Second, why did Ken's story about his truck just fall apart like that? Third, if this sighting is true, why did the police only ever investigate Friday? And finally, the million-dollar question, what could that DNA sample have proved if Ken had just given it? And just when it seems like the trail is about to go cold for good, one of the investigators makes a pretty shocking move. After the interview, as Ken is walking away, someone asks, "Did you just steal his cigarette butt?" And that single act leaves us on a huge cliffhanger. They might have just found a way to get his DNA after all.